Beyond and hello everyone, my name is Jonathon Dornbush. This is Loki. He's not very happy that I'm holding him up like this, but he's here to help us celebrate Podcast Beyond episode 700, and I'm joined this week by our official cast and not just a dog, joined this week by Brian Altano.
Hi, how are you? Happy Beyond.
Lucy O'Brien.
Hello. I tried
And
to
Max
build a
Scoville.
set. Wait, you gotta notice my set and praise my
Your
set.
Everyone go to the one up of Lucy.
You're so mean. Yes, look, I did it in a hurry.
You're building it out. That's what matters. And we're also joined this week by Max Scoville.
On our 700th episode yet.
Finally, Lucy has a set. That's what we've all been building up to over these 700 episodes together. Obviously, all four of us. But no, we're here to celebrate episode 700. And for those who are watching live, we're live on IGN, YouTube, and Twitch. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in and watching and celebrating with us live. For those who are listening or watching to this after, none of what I'm about to say will really matter to you, but just sit tight and we'll get to the full episode in just a second. Please stick around for the full episode because we'll be talking about all the latest PlayStation news, plus diving into some Q&A from the audiences around the different platforms we're on. And then we're going to be doing the finally long-awaited second episode of our Bloodborne Let's Play. Finally, we're going back to Yharnam. But we've got a little bit of a way before we get there to celebrate all of Beyond 700. So I did, of course, just want to start the show by saying thank you to everyone out there, whether you're watching live or you're listening or watching this afterward. Thank you so much for your support of the show. We love doing this. I often make sure the whole cast knows, but if they don't, this is always the highlight of my week to be able to do this and to be able to do it with all three of you. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to everyone out there celebrating with us.
Yeah, totally. Dude, you guys are awesome, all of you. I love working with all of you. I love doing the show, period. I miss doing PSX and interacting with people. So this is the best we can do for now, which is, I think it's important to say at the beginning of a big celebration. You go, this is the best we can do. And then people go, all right, well, let's take the expectations down a notch, let's shoot that in the sky right now.
What I want to note about the Bloodborne playthrough is that when we first shot that, which was right at the very tail end of normal life,
right?
Dorno was new to the Souls series, so he was inexperienced, and we were kind of helping him along a little bit, perhaps giving him too many hints, and a lot of commentators have said you guys need to make it harder for him. Well, subsequently, how many Souls games have you played, Dorno?
I've beaten Demon Souls and Dark Souls, and I'm 75% of the way through Sekiro, so...
Yeah, so we're not going to be helping him this time around. This is going to be a whole different experience. I just want everyone to know that.
We were no Bloodborne, you can't play it, which is messed up to be here's your first taste of one of the best games ever, and you can't play it for a year. So you were well, I guess I'll play all these other FromSoft games. So I don't know if anyone's ever I'm sure somebody's dropped Bloodborne and picked it back up the way you did, but I don't think anyone's so deliberately been well, I guess I'll just go, get good, over
elsewhere
here in parallel dimensions.
It's kind of like if we all planned Dorno's first trip to Europe, and we're all going to go to Italy, and then we couldn't, and then he was can I go to Spain, Germany, and France? And we're yeah, I guess. Sure. Get the training wheels off.
Yeah, I lasted until basically the launch of the PS5, and then Demon Souls came out, and I was well, this is too pretty. I can't not play it. And then from there, I just kind of haven't stopped. But I'm really excited to get back to Bloodborne. We're going to get to it a little bit later after the show, and of course, if you're watching the VOD version of this or listening on audio, the Bloodborne Let's Play will be available separately, so you can go check that out as well. But let's jump in, because despite us recording live, I fully expect there to be major PlayStation news the second we stop streaming. I fully expect that to happen. But thankfully, a little bit of news actually broke this morning that I want to start off the show with, and it comes from a big deep dive piece from Wired, who has basically, since the start of the PS5 been there. They were the ones to first officially sort of reveal Sony's plans for the PS5. And so there's a big new feature piece out from them. It's a very in-depth piece talking to Jim Ryan and a whole bunch of other developers from around the sort of Sony sphere. But one of the most interesting points that's brought up in this piece is a little bit of the way in. It says, according to Herman Holst, the Guerrilla co-founder, whom Jim Ryan tapped to lead PlayStation Studios in 2019, the group, and I assume the group is referring to PlayStation Worldwide Studios, has more than 25 titles in development for the PS5, nearly half of which are entirely new IP. So I wanted to bring this up, and before we get into like the math equation of what those 25 games are, I wanted to ask all of you, this feels a little bit, or maybe not a little bit, like very pointedly so, like refuting or a response to the report from a few weeks ago from Jason Schreier at Bloomberg, sort of about the movement of different projects within Sony, some of the cancellation of a potential Days Gone sequel, the worry that there would be doubling down on existing franchises and not new IP. Brian, I guess I'll start with you. Does this feel like a little bit of a response / does that like number surprise you? Does it seem expected? How does that read for you? So we should take a break, or? Okay, cool.
We're taking a quick break because something broke, but we'll be right back.
This is why we don't do it live normally,
Is it working?
It's working.
We're okay? We haven't broken the stream. Thank you all for your support and breaking our live stream with your support of Beyond 700.
That's definitely
breaking
what
news.
It was just so
we covered the
popular that
entire
everything
episode in
broke.
that span. So thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Have a good one.
That was great. We'll see you for PS6.
Yep, it's close this chapter of Beyond.
This is why we don't do this stuff live, because it's inevitably this like we have enough of these weird hiccups when we're not doing it live, and doing it live, it's like of course we get 2 minutes in.
That's exactly what you would expect. But so I don't know what people heard or what they did or didn't hear. So just briefly, we were talking about the Wired article talking about the 25 games in development for PlayStation Worldwide Studios. Brian, I was turning to you sort of about how it seems like they're sort of responding to recent worries about whether PlayStation was going to have new IP. How did you read this sort of
I think that's a totally valid point to make. I also feel like they had a string of bad PR and it could really only go up from there. I think anyone expected Sony to just be like down in the gutter for the rest of the generation is crazy, right? Like they have a hit selling system. They have a bunch of great studios working in unison on brand new projects. They've shipped a bunch of really cool games already. They have a bunch more coming. I do think they had a bad few weeks, but you could really only go up from there. I think it's awesome because this is showing us not necessarily that they have a bunch of studios that are working on stuff, but the new IP thing is really exciting because I think that part of the criticism a few weeks ago was specifically that they were, theoretically not as experimental as we wanted them to be. They were playing it safe, and making new IPs is antithetical to playing it safe, unless they're all just extremely boring new IPs, which I doubt from them,
Lucy, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
There we go. See, all these problems are happening. It's incredible. I was talking to myself for just a minute.
I was like, who should I talk to? Who should I call?
We're having a great time for Beyond
As
700.
you can see, I did nothing. I just said.
I loved it. Yeah.
The chat saying they can barely hear me too.
Barely hear me. Well,
Bear me, hear me.
Bear me, hear me.
They're calling me Barmy Harmy, which I think is weird.
Lucy, what I was trying to ask you was, I think understandably, when we were talking about that Bloomberg report, we were concerned because we do love seeing these risks taken by PlayStation. That's how we get to the franchises we have that we love right now. Do you sort of seeing this expanse? Obviously, there are only so many studios. Do you feel like this also might tie into, because they don't specify, do you think this ties into maybe some of the partnerships we've been seeing from them? Stuff like Haven Studios, the game from Firewalk Studios, that AAA multiplayer game. Do you feel like this number kind of maybe includes that stuff to help bolster the roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes the most sense. One thing that I also really like about this is yesterday there was that report that came out, and this is nothing new, right? Like, this is from the Ubisoft, EA, all of those financial reports that recently came out, and the picture from those two publishers was very like, we are focusing on free-to-play games, games as service, that sort of thing, the ever-evolving multiplayer landscape, and that's great. But as I mentioned on Twitter, I'm a single-player gal. Like, I enjoy my single-player experiences, and I think PlayStation makes the best single-player experiences, or some of the best. I'm not gonna be too controversial. But they're also the ones regularly putting focus on particularly story-driven IPs, and I mean, this is exciting to me. Like the Ubisoft EA stuff, that's nothing new, but it just served as a reminder that a lot of other publishers aren't putting this focus on these amazing story-driven games. And hearing Herman Holst say that, Jim Ryan say that, like, that's exciting to me. That, like, I hope that a lot of those games are more narrative-driven games, because that's what I want, and that's what PlayStation is so good at. So this was a lovely little palate cleanser after yesterday's not surprising, but very sort of stark report.
Worrying comments, yeah. Yes. For all of us who I think collectively we can kind of agree that we do gravitate toward those games more than the free-to-play sort of space and multiplayer stuff and whatnot. But obviously they need a well-rounded base. I think PlayStation kind of understands. They want those first-party single-player action-adventure games, but they need to have more to offset it. Max, I sort of wanted to ask on the half of them about being fresh IP. What are you, I guess, going into the PS5 life cycle, most excited by right now? Like the potential for all this new IP, seeing the series that we've been covering for the last few generations?
Here's the thing. We hear 25 new IPs, and I think we immediately sort of jump to like, oh, these are going to be like massive flagship AAA, God of War, Spider-Man, Days Gone kind of stuff. But I think we're also discounting, Sony has smaller things, or there's also the PlayStation VR 2 on the horizon, and it's entirely possible that one of the IPs is like a successor to, Tumble Down VR, or like, smaller, VR experiences. Maybe something that does weird stuff with the DualSense. I mean, it's possible we get like stuff like, with all due respect, like Sackboy's Big Adventure or whatever it's called, it was very fun, but that also isn't the kind of thing we immediately jump to being like, oh, that's like a huge first party Sony thing. But that was a PlayStation 5 exclusive, and PS5, PS4 exclusive. And I feel like it's very possible that, one of those IPs is something that we just do not care about, like another Wonder Book,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think this PS5, having 25 games for PS5 absolutely probably does include PSVR 2 in there. And so I kind of wanted to do a little bit of the mental math to get a sense of what we're looking at, I guess, with these 25 IPs, new and old. There's obviously the God of War sequel. I'm going to count Rift Apart because that's still, a couple weeks out. Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, Do we have anything else properly announced from Sony first party studios?
There was that rumor for, the original Last of Us remastered. We don't exactly know where that is. That hasn't been officially confirmed. I don't think we'll hear anything about that until like there's actual, production images of the show
totally
in progress. So, but yeah, I think you mostly listed it all.
That's so we're really working within the realm of and maybe Naughty Dog's multiplayer sort of factions thing. We're basically within the realm of like knowing a fifth of what that lineup could be, which is really exciting to me because I think my biggest worry, and please let me know if any of you feel differently, but I feel like right now with PlayStation, I have a really good vision of what the next year and a half looks like, but not beyond that. Like the rest of the life cycle is a bit of a mystery, and that's both exciting, but also sort of I hope they can continue this momentum, because like coming with Ratchet and Spider-Man and God of War and Horizon all within the first, year and a half of the PS5 is daunting. That is a lot to have for the beginning of a life cycle.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a tough situation, right? Because you don't want to put too many cards on the table and then invariably delay a bunch of those things. They're also having no problem selling. Well, they are having a problem selling PS5s. I'll correct that. It's very hard.
It's a good problem for them.
Yeah, and they just announced the other day that this is going to be a problem until 2022. And so I don't necessarily need. I'm always torn between like selfishly wanting to know what studios are working on, but also not wanting to see stuff too early, because then I have to spend years going, where is it? Why is it delayed? I'd rather, find out about something and then a few months later be playing it. But it is exciting to speculate about what could be coming, because we know a few things, but a lot of them don't even have release dates currently. So, it's sort of interesting. It's shot in the dark guesses on Horizon and God of War, and whether or not we'll even get those this year. They're rumored to be this year, but I'd be surprised if they land this year personally.
I'm definitely feeling like of the two, probably Horizon has the best shot, just because we've seen a trailer and gotten a little bit more detail. But yeah, outside of that, God of War is a mystery of whether it will come out this year. And then there's, of course, all of the studios that we don't know what they're working on. And so I kind of wanted to, before we move on to anything else, just sort of ask you, not knowing anything of what's to come, what potential studio, working on stuff are you sort of most excited to see stuff from? Because we don't know what Pixel Opus or Bend or London Studio, who did Blood and Truth, or obviously what, Team Asobi will be on next, even if we can probably guess it will be some sort of Astros. We're sort of in the dark about a lot of that stuff, but there's obviously a lot of really exciting teams within the portfolio. Lucy, I want to start with you. What team, whether known or not, are you most looking forward to right now?
I mean, I am excited for anything that Naughty Dog's doing, always. I'm not sure if this would ever happen. I would love Naughty Dog to do a full-on horror game. That's that is my ultimate sort of genre. I mean, because The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2 are very much horror games anyway, but I would love to see like a full sort of genre lean in. I would also like Bend to give it a horror game a stab, just because I think that the best parts of freaking what's it? Days Gone.
Yeah.
Apologies. It's early.
It's early in the morning. Again.
The best parts of that were, with the hordes, and obviously like they were the most thrilling and horrific. And I think that is something that Bend is obviously very good at. So yeah, like those two studios for me are definitely the ones I have my eyes on.
Max, what about you? I know we were talking a little bit about sort of the, PS5 and PSVR potential. What are you most excited to see?
You mentioned London Studio, who did Blood and Truth, which I think is my favorite VR game I've played. Like I've, played a fair amount of them, and I had a really good time with that. Like it was just it bit off exactly the right amount that it could chew. It was like a perfect sort of like, encapsulated just action movie experience, just shooting stuff and jumping off of buildings. And then there was just a bunch of like really just wonderfully dumb, gimmicky VR stuff in there. Like you could fiddle with the radio and open the vents in the car, or like you could vape in VR. Like it was just they had so much fun with that, and I want to see what they do with
the dream.
Yeah. Like I don't know. Like I was blown away when I played that first London Heist demo, and I was like, I want more of this. And then we got it, and it was great. And I think that was at a point where we weren't sure if PlayStation VR was a thing we'd see more of or not. Mm-hmm. And we know we're going to see more of it. So I guess I'm kind of like, okay, well, what else you got? Like, what next? Where do you go from here?
Absolutely, yeah. I really am excited for what that studio can do, because outside of Blood and Truth, they were pretty quiet this generation, other than SingStar at the beginning of it all, because that's kind of where they started out.
That's a weird transition. That really is
it's a
like to be
strange
like,
one.
yeah, you want to go from singing Taylor Swift to just like vaping and shooting people? Okay, why not?
They made it work.
There was that sort of rumor about London studio working on that kind of like spiritual successor to PlayStation Home. I know somebody in the chat brought it up recently too on YouTube, which is might theoretically be like a gathering place for people to like hang out and watch movies together. So that could be interesting in VR. Maybe you can vape there. You shouldn't vape in the movie theater, but maybe you'll be able to do it there.
Definitely. We at the very least know that they are working on, according to job listings, a next-gen IP. So whether it is like it feels like it probably won't be Blood and Truth 2, but whether it's a spiritual successor or something in that vein or something brand new, they're probably working on something, and I'm really excited to see what that is. Brian, before I do ask you, I just want to quickly, Lindsay Lohan had said on Twitch, is Kena Kena Bridge of Spirits first party or even Sony exclusive?
Don't say that seriously. Don't say that casually.
Lindsay Lohan.
Lindsay Lohan?
What a great name.
Not it's their cousin, I assume. So anyway, look, I've had to read a lot of strange Twitch names in my day, so I'm used to it. Anyway,
Lindsay
Kena
Lohan loves to vape in VR, by the way. She did a whole interview on it that I made
on a GTA cover. That is not being published by Sony. I think it's just getting a big marketing push because it is console exclusive to PS4 and PS5.
Right.
I think right now this 25 games thing is like games being published or developed by worldwide studios. But anyway, Brian, what are you most excited for before we
Sucker
shift
Punch.
gears?
So I want to see what Sucker Punch does next. I loved Ghost of Tsushima. Like, there's a lot of games that are like Assassin's Creed 1 and Watch Dogs 1 and Days Gone, where you're like, the sequel's going to be so much better. But I feel like Ghost of Tsushima was already at a higher sort of like level than those other games were. So to see where they go from there is going to be super fascinating. They're obviously been toiling away at the multiplayer stuff that people absolutely love. I'm sure it'll get a sort of dedicated PS5 port at some point, but I want to see what other stories they can tell in that world and worlds adjacent to that, other time periods, even if they're smaller, sort of like standalone type things that are 10 hours, 12 hours, a Miles Morales type situation where it takes you 8 hours to finish a story, but like maybe 15, 100% it. I would love to see that. I feel like the world design is so gorgeous. The animation and the atmosphere and everything, the combat was so much fun. I had so much fun collecting stuff in that world. I just want more of that. I've mentioned this before. It was such a treat to play that game during the pandemic and have that level of escapism. It was, I had the same kind of feeling with Animal Crossing, which had considerably less decapitations in it, unless you use the cheat code that Nintendo doesn't want you to find out about. But yeah, Ghost of Tsushima was awesome. I cannot wait to see what Sucker Punch does next.
Yeah, me too. Especially with, I think, as you were saying, the surprise that Legends was to everyone, both, surprise announcement, but also just surprise of how great it was. I think whatever they work on next, there's a lot of potential there. And yeah, of course, please stay tuned for later in the show. The 7 cheat codes Nintendo doesn't want you to know about. We'll be covering that a little bit toward the second half of the show. But I do want to move on. Obviously, there's a lot of exciting stuff we don't know is announced, but the next big PlayStation first-party game we're going to get is Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. And I know we spent a bit of last week's episode on it, so I don't want to spend too long, but I did want to mention I have seen around 30 to 40 minute hands-off demo of more brand new Ratchet & Clank gameplay. You can see some of that in my video preview up on IGN and YouTube. I saw about 40 or so minutes of the game, spoke with both Marcus Smith, the creative director, and Mike Daly, the game director for Rift Apart, and also sat in on a few roundtables between a bunch of different Insomniac artists and animators, writers, developers, designers, just got sort of a whole suite of understanding of what they're working on. And my big takeaways that I wanted to bring up, and obviously if anyone in chat has questions, feel free to ask them. But my biggest takeaways were, they clearly have learned some stuff from Spider-Man and are putting it into Ratchet & Clank on both a gameplay level and a storytelling level. That really, really surprised me. They're doing a lot of sort of the Spider-Man thing where it's like you're in the midst of a crazy action sequence, cutting away to a little bit of a cinematic without, ever having a load or a cut, then right back into the action just to keep the momentum going to get you to move around a space in more interesting ways. But they're also going for like way more emotional depth. You know, like I think Ratchet and Clank always gets talked about as how like it looks like a Pixar movie. I think I saw a tweet going around that like every Ratchet and Clank game for the last like 6 of them has been like it almost looks like a Pixar movie. But the thing about Pixar too is that they are also full of heart and emotion and surprisingly like mature themes. And there's a moment in the gameplay I saw where Rivet, the new Lombax, and Clank are being chased by this giant mech called the Fixer, who essentially is having an existential crisis because the Fixer is broken and can't fix itself. And so if the Fixer can't be fixed, nothing should be fixed. And so it goes on a destruction spree. And they're trying to figure out how to stop it.
It's got some Incredibles vibes, right?
Yeah, and they're like, we don't know how to stop it. Like it's way too big to fight. This is not, they're Rivet and Clank are having this conversation as they're riding around like an extended rail grinding scene. And at one point the Fixer is like, oh, you too, little one, are broken, like referring to Clank because he's been a bit damaged when he went through dimensions. And he's like, oh no, am I broken too? And Rivet's like, well, no, you're not broken, because if you're broken, then so am I. And I think we're both pretty awesome. And it's like, it gives Clank this epiphany of like, oh yeah, me be like having, circuitry a little bit differently or something, not working properly as expected doesn't make me broken. I'm still Clank. And he has this like emotionally like mental health moment where he recognizes this and, basically reasons with the Fixer to kind of tell it like, hey, here's how you should be thinking of the world. And it works. It takes hold. And like the Fixer, realizes the error of its ways. And it's just this sort of like surprising moment I did not expect at all in the middle of like, wacky rift hopping and all the excitement of like Ratchet and Clank that I'm used to. It was like really kind of, it was touching. And I didn't expect that from a gameplay demo of here. Obviously if any of you have any questions, feel free to let me know, but it was like, the gameplay is what I would have expected. It's Ratchet and Clank. If you like the third-person action shooting combat, it seems better, more refined. The weapons are crazier than ever. There's a lot of really fun stuff there. But like that emotional depth mixed with like the tech that they're working with right now just makes me think this will probably be the most immersive Ratchet and Clank and maybe even the most immersive like Insomniac game.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
I've seen a lot of feedback on Twitter from people who have, seen the game. I want to know how big it looks or how big it feels or how big Sony is promising it's going to be, just because if you look at what we've seen so far, that world looks enormous. But a lot of worlds can look enormous and have very obvious limitations and yeah, I'm just intrigued by the scope of it, particularly considering you're jumping through dimensions and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the scope was a thing that I spoke with both Mike Daly and Marcus Smith about a lot, and one of the most interesting things that they kept bringing up was that like it's a combination of it's a full-length Ratchet and Clank game, so even though the 2016 reboot and Into the Nexus, the last 2 games, were a bit shorter, this one will definitely be a more fully packaged like. Harkening back to the original PS3 and PS2 ones in length and scope, but are really wanting to take advantage of the PS5, but not in a way that's just putting stuff in there to put stuff in there. It is really about making sure everything they're adding is really fun and additive and clever in a way that they wouldn't have been able to do before. So it's that concept of, the rift hopping. They're able to load 2 simultaneous planets at the same time. And they're not just loading a chunk of the planet, they're loading the entire planet as you're hopping between them. And it's...
Mike, I love that you said that because like, a fear of mine, again, people who watch this show know that I have not really played Ratchet and Clank before. I was a Jack and Daxter kid. I don't know why that's tribal, but it is. And it's like, everything is tribal. But like, I like the idea that they're actually you're going to be doing fun stuff within this world. It would be a shame if you had to like collect 5 cogs in between jumping through planets.
Well, and I sort of asked them of that, of like, how do you make sure the stuff you're adding isn't just there for the sake of it? And because you look at the list of things you can do, it'll be like the basic Ratchet and Clank gameplay that you would expect, plus sections where you'll just be playing as Clank, plus sections as this new robot you'll be playing as called Glitch. There will be, like rideable alien aerial combat to go through. There's pocket dimensions to explore that are totally side and optional. Gold bolts to collect. Ratchet's armor now comes in essentially, you can collect different suits of armor, but they're all scattered in 3 different pieces. But you can then also mix and match them so you're not locked in. Like they're trying to make sure that everything you're going for feels valuable and that there's a point to all of it, and not just, well, we added 72 more gold bolts. I talked to Marcus Smith, because all of you know I'm a huge trophy person. I was talking to him of like, as a collectathon person, someone who loves those types of platformers, how do you make sure it's fun? He's like, I've been guilty of, because he was working on the Resistance franchise, of kill 10,000 monsters to get the trophy or whatever, and he's like, we didn't want that to be the experience we were pushing people to play here, whether it's in the main game or exploring side stuff or trophy hunting. They want it to all be very meaningful, and seeing the lessons they learned from Spider-Man 1 to Miles Morales makes me feel like it's leaning more in the Miles Morales sort of realm.
I sort of feel like a lot of games have kind of taken that note in the last couple of years or so, where it feels like at least objectives for trophy-based stuff have become a little more sophisticated and a little less grindy. Obviously, there are outliers there, but you get a lot of games that are not necessarily just collectathons. Although we obviously had that for a long time. I hopped on the YouTube chat and asked people if they had any questions for Ratchet and Clank for Dorno, but because I'm co-hosting a live show and I type with one hand, I said dinner. So I actually don't know what Ratchet and Clank are having for dinner, but Chris Adams says, I'm very interested in the dinner options. I would guess like a whole roast turkey and maybe like a clock is something that Clank would eat.
In Nefarious City, I've got to assume there's some really great street carts around.
Yeah.
Just looking at sort of the vendor situation there. I feel like there's got to be
some Blade Runner vibe, right? Maybe there's some noodle carts. Chris Adams says, very interested in the dinner options, but I really do have they mentioned anything about performance mode options like Spider-Man Miles Morales? That's sort of become a thing that's like, consciously baked into every next gen game now. And sometimes they sort of bury it. I noticed like 20 hours into my, second or third playthrough of Resident Evil Village that there was like a ray tracing option that was just, and I was like, oh yeah, I should have messed with that.
There will be it will have performance and quality mode options right from the jump. They were still waiting to get back specifics. I think they just wanted to make sure they were like 100% on it, because the game, at least they haven't announced it as far as I know, hasn't gone gold yet. Again, given our track record, it'll probably go gold after this show, but it will ship with 2 modes, performance and quality. So similar, I think you can expect to what you get from Miles Morales will also be here. Of course, Miles also got a like combination mode a little bit after launch that let you have ray tracing on the performance mode version. So it's possible we'll see, things like that if the players want it. Insomniac seems really, really great about responding to, fan concerns, especially in these times where they're able to patch stuff like they did with the Spider-Man remastered saves being able to move over from the PS4 version. So I wouldn't be shocked if there's a mode that people really, really want and the fan base craves for it. They'll probably be able to work it in there. But yeah, you will have those options right from the jump.
Did you get a look at any weaponry? Because they've always been known for like, like disco ball guns and stuff like that. Anything cool?
Yeah, so a couple things. My favorite ones, some of them were shown in the State of Play, but my hands down favorite one is the topiary sprinkler, which essentially you throw out a sprinkler and it turns enemies into plants. And it essentially roots them in place so they can't move for a short amount of time. And while that's like funny and amusing that they turn into like hedge versions of themselves, it's also really helpful because a lot of enemies will now have shields that you can't hit directly head on. So this lets you strafe around them to be able to get to them. There's that one. There is a Mr. Fun Guy or Fungi. He's sort of Mr. Zircon-esque, where you send out this sentient mushroom floating in the air, and he gleefully is just shooting like radioactive spores at enemies, and he's just like, wahoo, yay, woo, and he's just doing that for fun.
Those are copyrighted noises, by the way.
They are. Those are, yeah, that's directly from the game. I apologize for the DMCA takedown we're about to get. And then another favorite one that I saw is called the Ricochet, and so you send out a single bullet and it hits an enemy, and then the ball that is, your ammunition will kind of hang in the air for a second, and the player can direct it back to that enemy or to other enemies. But it also has a like pinball sort of effect to it where it like lights up like it's a pinball machine getting hit. And if you enact another shot with it at just the right time where it kind of opens up, you'll do more damage. So there's suddenly like a little mini game as you're playing to kind of focus on as well. Those were the ones I saw. I feel like there's definitely more. We didn't see a full suite of it, but those were the ones that stood out the most to me of like, oh, these are weird and silly and fun in the way I expect Ratchet to be.
This is what I love about video games and talking about video games, is that we can have all these like extremely serious, weighty, like, this is the first real next-gen game. This is like, showing what the PS5 can do. And then it's like, and then you turn all your enemies into a plant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there's a guy called Mr. Fungi, and it's a pun.
Yeah, the frames drop when the robot throws up, and I don't like it.
This, like, we're talking about like ray tracing and like frame rate, and like is there like a story message about mental health, and it's like this is a fun video game, and it's for kids of all ages. Is there a gun that turns people into bushes? Let me know,
and there is. Yeah, well,
so yeah,
that's what I really love about this one is I think that it's straddling the line of both of those things. Like obviously, Ratchet Clank is very all ages friendly, especially compared to some other Sony stuff. But I do think they're cognizant, and a lot of Marcus Smith was talking about this of like, there's a lot of newer, younger talent on the team that wasn't there who grew up on Ratchet and Clank. And so they're very aware of both like the lineage of this game, but they also want to make this something that is a really good entry point and a new place for people. And that's why like Rivet and the sort of multiple dimensions is so important to everything. But yeah, their like weapon design philosophy is, weapons need to either be a 10 out of 10 in either being funny, powerful, or strategic. And often for them, most guns or weapons are 2 out of 3 of those. And so they have this balance of making sure the weaponry is all fun and useful. And the combat scenarios, they said, were like bigger than ever. The battlefields are much larger than previously. The enemy variety and amount of enemies will be more challenging. So it really feels like they are... They know where Rift Apart stands with the rest of the lineage, but they're also like, this is our chance to do something incredible at the start of the PS5. And that was one of the biggest exciting takeaways I had from Marcus Smith, where he was just like, yeah, we love what we're doing, and this is just the start. Like, we're only at the beginning of the PS5. Things are only going to keep getting better.
Denver8 on YouTube says, I want a shot that complains as it's being fired. And I really like that idea. It reminds me of...
man.
The like animated bullets from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Roger Rabbit,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
That was my go-to on that one.
They could
the little
totally
cowboy. Yeah,
a deprecating weapon feels like, if it's not in there, Insomniac, please put that in as DLC because that sounds amazing. But yeah, that was sort of my main takeaways.
Not annoying at all.
Exactly. No, it definitely won't be too. You won't need to tell the gun, hey, you should maybe go talk to someone after a little bit. But yeah, those were my main takeaways from Ratchet and Clank. Again, today we are officially less than a month out from that game, which is sort of wild. So hopefully we'll have more to talk about it soon. I can't wait to actually dive into the game again. I didn't get to play it, but please go check out the full preview. You can see like 10 more minutes of gameplay on IGN. It's the game looks gorgeous. I can't wait to see more. But in terms of stuff we can play, I do want to move on to a little bit of what we've been playing, because I think across the board, we've all been having quite a time with Resident Evil Village. And as the most newcomer, I would say, to the Resident Evil Village or Resident Evil franchise in general, I kind of want to throw to all of you to hear how you've been taking to Village as such more long-time or more experienced Resident Evil players, even if you've just been catching up the last year or two, I know. But like for some of you, this has been like a lifelong love. Brian, I'll start with you. How are you liking Village so far?
Oh my God. I absolutely adore this game. It takes, I would say... a lot of the sort of, the skeleton, the build up the elements of 4, which is, one of my top 3 favorite games of all time, with some of the sort of like creature design and environments and atmosphere from games like Bloodborne, but then also a lot of the stuff that they pioneered in 7, and I think course corrects a lot of the mistakes that game made. Some of my biggest takeaways from 7 were that it was scary and atmospheric and moody, but that the enemy design was sort of lacking. The gunplay felt a little mushy, and I didn't really like the last third of the game. Whereas I feel like Resident Evil 5 is sort of split into 5 main areas. I won't spoil any of them. There was a lot of debate about which ones are people's favorites and stuff like that. So I beat the game, and then I beat the game on a harder difficulty setting, and I'm now playing on the hardest difficulty setting, the Village of Shadows, which is just bonkers. Most of the werewolves are replaced with the ones that have like hockey helmets and big metal fists and stuff like that. It's tough as nails. It's a great challenge. It's super fun. I adore this game. I would describe the story as hogwash. It's
Fair.
nonsense in the best sort of like B movie D tier horror. Like, it is just lunacy, and I love it for that. It totally commits to the bit. The VO, the characters are completely over the top. It is an absolute blast. I think it does horror super, super well. It's not like overtly scary, but it does a lot in terms of like building up mood and tension. Settings are amazing. I absolutely love this game. It is by far my game of the year. I don't see anything topping it right now.
Awesome. Lucy, I know you're pretty early on in it, but how have you been taking to it so far? I know we talked a little on Twitter about it, but
Yeah, I'm like 3.5 hours in. I'm adoring it. I think I'm sort of going to expand on what Brian said in that, like, it has some Resident Evil series. I sort of feel like what this game is doing is going back to the weirdness of Resident Evil. Resident Evil 7 was a great game insofar it was like, this is very terrifying. I'm being chased by like an old like redneck with a shotgun, and there's no way I can fight back. We're seeing a lot of games, survival horror games, especially in the indie space, doing that exact same thing. Games like Outlast, for example, and they do it very well. And I felt like Resident Evil 7 was kind of like another one of those games, right? And I really enjoyed it, but I missed the weird, twisted heart of Resident Evil from it. And I feel like Resident Evil Village has gone back to that. Like the freak show at the very this is not a massive spoiler, but like the cast of characters who you're going to face, just so fun and ridiculous, and just exactly why I love this series. I think it's weird and wrong in all the right ways. I love exploring I'm in the castle right now. It is so gorgeous and just ridiculously ostentatious. And sometimes I find myself just racing through video game spaces, like just concentrating on the gameplay, concentrating on my task at hand. Here, and I know it's kind of like, it's not really how I should be feeling because I should be scared, but here I'm just like wandering around and admiring every corner of this world that they've built. And again, that's because it is so like ostentatious and ridiculous and just dripping with attention to detail. I'm in love with it, and I know I haven't finished, so I'm not going to keep rambling on. But I'm with Altano. Like, it is by far my favorite game experience thus far of 2021, and I'm just like, I'm enjoying every second of it.
yeah, it's it's definitely up there for me so far too. I'm a little bit ahead of you, and Max, right before we get to you, just want to remind people, as we are live, we're going to do some Q&A, so please start getting some questions in chat, and we'll be keeping an eye on those to answer in just a little bit. But Max, you wrote down, just got through the really wet part. So how are you enjoying Resident Evil Village?
Can you hear me okay? Do I sound okay? Maybe not.
Don't know if we can hear Max, but can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Oh no.
Okay. So this is fun.
Oh,
Two
Max
of the
is
programs we
Discord
use to
crash.
communicate.
So we'll get back to
stopped
Max
working
in just a
for
little bit of a
me,
second.
You type it out, I can say it for you, and then you
Perfect,
move your
yeah.
mouth and
He's just typing dinner.
We'll do a text to speech. Red, can you, as we're live,
he
Red,
didn't like the boss fight where you fight those 3 monkeys with the covered mouth, the covered ears, and the covered eyes, which is I think
that's more of that's a Sekiro spoiler, I think. What is he? Help, Red. Are you able to help Max in the background while he figures things out?
Can you hear me?
Cool.
Apparently, the audience can hear Max, but
No?
we cannot.
Okay, I'm gonna unmute Max.
Hey,
Can you hear me
can you hear me?
on vMix?
I can hear you.
Maybe.
Well, no wonder we don't do this live on a regular basis. Wow.
There we go. He's back.
Okay.
Now I can hear.
But it's
Yeah,
weird
there we
because
go.
we're using the same
yes,
tech
we
that
can.
we always use, and just because it's live, everything's going wrong.
Exactly. So Max, how are you enjoying Resident Evil after the really wet part?
I love this game a whole bunch. It's exactly what I was hoping it would be. I was a little bit apprehensive it was going to be too scary for me because I'm a ginormous baby, but after kind of an initial part, which is a little bit jumpy, it opens up and gets very, very fun, very actiony, like obviously hits a lot of RE4 notes. Yeah, it's I'm totally enjoying the just the environments and just exploring. I think there's something specifically about how kind of like archetypally horrifying it is. Like it feels like kind of oh God, I saw someone on Twitter compare it to like a small town Halloween haunted house tour where like it's a bunch of like local actors like really hamming it up, and then you go in a hallway and stuff jumps out at you, and it's like kind of campy, and it almost hits like the sort of greatest hits of different things that might scare you, to the point that it becomes like sort of so over the top and so much of a variety pack of different types of horror that it feels like a Halloween breakfast cereal mashup. So
Yeah,
I'm loving it. I'm very excited about this game.
It feels like a theme park. Like, I feel like I'm not, and I'm playing it on standard difficulty, so keep that in mind. But I feel like I'm not, I'm not having to really be strategic, so to speak. Like, I feel like I'm being kind of guided by the game through a set route. And I don't mind that at all. Like, I'm loving it for what it is. I'm loving that it feels like a guided tour of a very, very messed up small town theme park.
Yeah, I go ahead, Brian. Yeah.
No, I was just going to add to that real quick. I think that you both just nailed it. There's something really awesome about the sort of slight freedom that it gives you to kind of mess around in the margins between the big beats and areas and boss fights and stuff like that. It's got like just enough Far Cry in it where if you're like, if I want to hunt chickens for an hour and the large man in the cart will make me a fish dinner that will make me stronger forever, I can do that. If I want to go shoot goats on the roof, I can do that. If I want to like put doll parts together for an hour and sell them, I can do that. Or I could just go right through the main story. I think that's the perfect kind of game for me, is like a game that's like that length but also has enough kind of in the back end that if you really like it, it's there for you and you can dig around in it.
Yeah, it's got a really great blend of that, and especially the way it focuses everything around the village. Like, I did really think, oh, village in the title, maybe it'll just be sort of like lip service to the environment, but that is really the core concept of what you're always returning to, and there are these other environments, and we're not going to spoil anything, especially with some people on the show, like Lucy and myself, being pretty early on, but the way it uses that village and the way, like you were both just saying, it lets you return to that stuff and unlock new things to be able to find new items and whatnot. There is that slight bit of Metroidvania-ish to it that really, really works for me, in between both getting scared like crazy sometimes and also laughing hysterically at the weirdness of it. It's a really great blend of that stuff. I can't wait to keep going in depth on it. I know some people have asked if we wanted to do a spoiler cast for it, and when we all beat it, perhaps we can gather to talk about it in depth.
I would love to.
I would love to do that.
Yeah.
I'm dying to talk about this game more, especially with Lucy is a gigantic horror fan. Max really likes horror. Dornbush, I assume you'll tolerate our ramblings for.
I love horror. I just get scared very easily. I am extremely easily scared. Is the problem?
I don't actually like horror. I like monsters, and they are frequently found in horror. So I'll tolerate the scary part to meet the monsters and engage with them.
Yeah, and there are. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Brian.
No. I was going to say there are some wonderful designs in this game. There were some moments where I was like, you all really understand like what makes horror great. And I think there's horror is weird because it's like one of the only genres where people will judge it based on how scary it is. And they'll say like, oh, that's not a horror movie because it wasn't scary. And it's like, well, horror is more than just how much it scares you. In the same way, like a drama is not judged by how dramatic it is specifically.
Can we just drag this out? Can we? Because Brian, you were talking about this on Twitter. You said that Bloodborne is one of your favorite horror games, and
Right.
people were like, "It's not horror; it's an action RPG." And it's like, no, but it's like Frankenstein Dracula.jpg horror. Like it's so rooted in horror thematically, while it's mechanically an action RPG. I think it's survival horror is a video game genre, mechanically speaking, in that you've got sparse resources and you've got to fight things that scare you. But at the same time, you can have horror tonally, thematically overlaid on basically any other type of gameplay.
It's why I was happy Lucy mentioned The Last of Us Part 2 earlier as like being horror, because to me that like I don't think Naughty Dog gets enough credit for truly understanding the genre. There are moments in that game that handle horror better than I think any games that you would just basically put under the bucket of horror. I think when people think of horror, they go like Outlast, right? But if you look at something like The Last of Us, the Bloodborns and stuff like that, they handle horror exceptionally well. Whereas you may not just go, that's a horror game, but it is rooted in horror. It is drenched in horror. It is thematically top to bottom celebrating horror. So yeah, I'm with you.
It's like Altano. I was watching some of the feedback from. We just put up a review of Spiral, which is the new movie in the Saw series, and our reviewer did not like it at all. And I was reading some of the comments, and everyone was like, there are no good horror movies anymore. Like, this is just an example of how terrible horror is in 2021. And it's just like, what? Like some people have a very narrow view of what horror is, both in the game space and in the movie space. And I feel like a lot of people get frustrated if they see like Hollywood pumping out bad horror movies, or we're not seeing enough like horror in the AAA gaming space. But there are so many fantastic horror movies and games. I wouldn't even say they're in the margins. You just have to like look a little bit beyond
horror is
something starring Chris Rock.
Yeah, it's arguably, which
I've seen Chris Rock.
I've seen Spiral, and I think that it like the sort of traditional saw trap parts of that movie are very well done horror. The kind of stuff that will make you sort of hide your face from wanting to look at it. I would argue that horror is in a better spot than it's been probably since the 70s or 80s. I mean, get a Shudder account. Like there are new, I know most of you do. There are new movies that are being added to that every day. I'd say that like horror games, we don't have a Silent Hill right now, and that sucks. But I think there's a lot of games being developed by people who grew up worshiping games like Silent Hill, and they're putting that DNA into their modern products, and it shows. And I really, really love that. And one of the great things about Resident Evil Village is that I think that like, and I kind of want to put, I was going to ping you about this, Lucy, but I want to put something together of sort of like the nods that it has to existing horror, because there's a lot of, there's a little bit of The Ring, there's a little bit of The Witch, there's a couple of little details in there that you're like, oh, that's a, not necessarily an Easter egg, but that's a nod. That's a nice little reference right there to something,
There's a ton of homage work in there, and as we often do on the show, Lucy, if we want to talk about that as a feature piece after the show, we can always pitch content.
Let's definitely talk about that, because I would love to see that.
I'm absolutely there with you. I think the way it's blending the entirety of the genre and not just trying to be the as I think you all were saying, there's a larger understanding of what horror can be, especially in video games. And I think Village walks the line of campy horror, genuinely like jump scare horror, unnerving horror. It really threads the needle in a lot of ways, and I'm really loving it so far. As we sort of lean toward wrapping up, please, if anyone has any questions in chat, please feel free to start putting those in. But I thought I'd switch gears over while we get a few questions in, perhaps, to a segment that we do on the show that we started a couple years back called Memory Card. And Memory Card, of course, is our weekly segment where you, the viewers and listeners at home, write in with your wacky, weird, sad, happy, whatever memories of your PlayStation gaming life, and we read those on the show. But this week, I'm not reading one of yours. I'm telling you one of mine. Gasp. Isn't that a plot twist? It's not really. You probably should have expected it, given how sentimental I often am. But no, this week I wanted to just take a moment and genuinely say thank you to everyone who has supported the show in any way, whether you've watched or listened since just last week. I've seen some people tweeting about, I just started listening and I love it. Or if you've been listening since, for years, if you've been listening since episode 1, like I did, thank you for genuinely making this show such a just a highlight of our weeks, a phenomenal gathering point to talk about PlayStation and so much more that we all love talking about and getting nerdy about. I've probably said this before on the show, but if I haven't, Beyond has been part of my life before I was on it. I have been listening since episode 1, and I've been pretty open about this, and then I'll move away from the sads. When my mom passed away when I was younger in high school, I went home and I didn't know where to turn to. I didn't know what to do. So I put on some IGN podcasts and I listened to Beyond of that week like 2 or 3 times because it was just comfort food for me at the time. And so this show has meant so much to me from its start and so much throughout my life. And so to be here celebrating episode 700 with you all, with this cast who I love so dearly, with our producers, with everyone, it just means the world to me. And I'm so appreciative that you all, watch the show enough that we get to keep doing it every week. It really means so much to me.
We're lucky to have you, Dorna.
We're so lucky to have you. I mean, the 3 of us as well, like I feel we're kind of cut from the same cloth, and without you, I feel like this could be kind of a slightly more cynical show.
Miserable. You can say miserable.
you give this show so much heart, and so much care, and we couldn't do it without you, and we're just this show is lucky to have you.
I appreciate that a lot, and it means a lot, and thank you all for doing this show with me and for it getting to be such a fun time. I know you were joking about being cynical, but I think the conversations we've had, especially in this last year when we've all not been able to do the show in person together. Brian, you were talking about how the first Bloodborne Let's Play was the last thing we all recorded in person together, and it's held up in my mind as just such a memory of what us as a show and as a cast and as friends, can do together.
We left that pizza, the leftovers, in that studio, and it's just covered in rats and skeletons now, which is about as Bloodborne as it can get. No, exactly. I think we finished it all.
We did. I think we got through it all, but and it was delicious. But we, I just love doing the show with you all, and especially during this past year where we've not been able to do it in person. And, we've had some weeks where we got pretty serious about where the world was and where life was, but also found weeks to be hilariously weird and wacky about Bloodborne, about other PlayStation games, the PS5 launch, all that stuff. It's been such a fun, packed year on this show to be doing it in this way, but I couldn't have asked for a more wonderful group of friends and castmates to do it with.
We talk about people who grew up on Ratchet and Clank making the new Ratchet and Clank. I feel like you're kind of the version of that with Beyond. Like you grew up listening to this, and you started out back in the day, and like now you took it and you're making it your own, and it's an absolute delight because of that. And you put so much heart into the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I hope it does come through because the show means so much to me, and I'm so thankful for everyone out there who supports it. We're going to be doing our Bloodborne Let's Play in just a little bit, but Brian, I don't know if you've been taking a look. I'm going to scroll through chats just a little bit. Any major questions popping up that we should address before we sort of head into the stream?
Nate Dunn on YouTube suggests that we should put Jonathon Dornbush in Smash Brothers. So I just wanted to ask you what would be one of your signature moves there?
Oh man, I mean, I'm gonna have to go with
PlayStation game Smash Brothers.
Famous, in PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale 2, we can swap it to there. Probably one of my signature moves would be to go back to that Ratchet and Clank weapon, a self-deprecating joke. It would probably be a remark. Would be the way I'd try to defeat my enemies.
What about poetry? What about bad poetry? That's like your special move.
And then the other characters just walk off the level.
My special.
The other characters like break out in sweat and walk off.
It's a bad sonnet, and it goes so long that they're like, "All right, this match is over. It's not worth it. We can't do this anymore."
Games, Coffee, and Collecting on YouTube says, not a question, but this show is the highlight of our weeks too. I started watching in the beginning of my enlistment in the Marines and have enjoyed all of the hosts over the years. You four are exceptional. Thank you so much. Thank you for your service. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
A lot of people talking about how like video game content, IGN stuff in general has like really helped them through the pandemic. That has been like this weird silver lining with all of this is we cover and celebrate escapist fantasy for a living, and it has been really good to have that stuff. I actually it was weird. When I interviewed the director of Spiral the other day, he said that a lot of people have been really into horror since the pandemic hit. And that people who are into horror are actually more prepared or were more prepared for the pandemic And I think that applies to gamers too. I think there's a lot of people that play video games that are just like, well, I know how to save stuff and I know how to deal with horrible scenarios. I know about doomsday apocalypse envisions that I have to survive. Like, I think we're not great at it, but I think we handled it a little bit better than some people who are just like, I only watch comedies and rom-coms, and what is happening? What is going on?
So on a sillier note, we got a great dumb question here from Zen Bloke on the YouTube chat, which, do we have time for a goofy hypothetical?
I think so, yeah. No one's told me otherwise.
He said, who would you drop into an established series to spice it up? I would stick Begbie from Trainspotting into Mortal Kombat.
That's great. That's so good.
Yeah. Oh, man. If we can cross all sort of entertainment and media, yeah, that really opens up the possibilities. Oh, man.
Oh, well, I mean, let's put Scorpion from Mortal Kombat in Animal Crossing. And he just lives in one of the houses, and you have to go to his house and be like, you dropped your chain again. And he's like, oh, thanks.
Oh, it's a gift for me? Okay. I mean, yeah, the dissonance is what always comes to mind. So immediately my head is like, oh yeah, put Kratos in like Parks and Recreation, and he's like having an issue with his like backyard zoning permits and needs to talk to like Leslie Knope about how to fix it. That just seems like a good half hour that would work.
Yeah, I would put like Babu Frick into The Last of Us.
Ooh.
No.
Do you want to kill him?
He's just there. You know, there's like a really sad scene with like Ellie talking to her girlfriend, and you know, lots of sad moral quandaries, and then Babu Frick is just
Babu Frick.
Yeah.
He's just there. He's
like,
it's the scene where they're having their kiss in like the weed den. He's like, I have a blunt for you. Yeah. It's just like, hello. Yeah, that's definitely, I think, what Babu Frick would add to that series.
I was going to say put Crash Bandicoot in The Last of Us, but it's like the dude from the 90s Crash Bandicoot commercials who wears the mascot suit.
Ooh, yeah.
And he's just like, it's filthy. It's like covered in black mold and dirt and blood. And he's just like living in an old abandoned GameStop or something. And you got to go in there and, I don't know, help him push a truck. Or he's like, oh, there's a bunch of dried Wumpa fruits in the Trader Joe's down the street. You want to help me break in and get them? You're like, absolutely not. I don't know. It's not a good idea. It's a bad idea. Also, he's getting a divorce. That's the key thing.
Of course.
He's recovering from his divorce. Yeah.
I can't wait to read your Crash Bandicoot divorce fanfic. I really need to see.
Should probably get on that.
Yeah, that's a dramatic reading for a future beyond. But any other questions anyone spotted before we wrap up for today's episode, and then make our way to Bloodborne?
Jose Arroyo on YouTube says, what PS character can you see making a fun cameo in the pocket dimensions of the new Ratchet and Clank? Yeah, I guess they could theoretically do that, right? I feel like there might be a Spider-Man thing in there somewhere if they're allowed to legally.
I'd like to see Aloy being there. I feel like she's a very sort of like heroic, wise presence in any video game, and I'd like to see her make a cameo.
That could work. I was thinking within the Insomniac family, like a quick like pass by of the Sunset Overdrive city. Like they just see it in a pocket. It's sort of over there.
That's a great idea.
Feels like it's got to be there. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential. I hope there's some fun Easter eggs in there. Again, we'll be getting to that game in a month, so I'm really excited for that. But I think that is probably all the time we have, unfortunately, for Podcast Beyond episode 700. Thank you, Max, Brian, and Lucy, for joining me for this week and for joining me on this show in perpetuity. I know I said it, but I love doing the show so much with you all, and I'm so thankful for you all being here.
Thank you. We love you, Dorno.
And thank you to our producers, Red and Marion, for helping to make this show work, and everyone else at IGN who's helping to make this live show work. If you're watching on the main IGN YouTube, this episode will be ending, and we'll see you all soon. But if you're watching elsewhere, we will be continuing on IGN Games with our Bloodborne Let's Play in just a little bit, so please stick around. The rest of the cast is going to get a little bit of a break to grab some water, but I'll be hanging out to chat, hang out, talk about any other questions you may have. But thank you otherwise so much for listening and for watching this episode. We all hope you're safe. We hope you're well. And as always, beyond.
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 For the 700th time, beyond.
We did it. We did episode 700. And now I think all of you are free to grab some drink. I'm totally going to just say this. I don't know if it's, on camera or not, but please feel free to all take a quick break. I will be hanging around. I hope everyone in chat is going to hang around. We're going to get
how long do we...
everything going. So I'm happy to hang out with chat and talk about things as we go. But thank you all for being here. And we'll get to Bloodborne in just a bit.
There's that
man.
Mr. Bloodborne. I'm excited for it.
Filthy clothes.
Look at that nasty coat.
Hey,
look at that bloody buddy.
Hey, Rid and Car, I just changed my camera. Is there any way you can adjust